And still, though over time the responses have not changed very much, the responses themselves are very, very diverse. Is it our bodies? Is it our clothing? Is it the way that we act? The best definition that I heard is kind of a non-definition. Definitions change and evolve over time and shift with context. We can say this about almost all of the words that we use. Categories are not absolute. If we say it's our chromosomes, we know most men and women, most people are born with 46 chromosomes. If you have XX, you're a woman. If you have XY, you're a man. Most people have XX or XY, but some have 45 or 47 or 48 chromosomes, XXY, XYY, XXX, XXXY. What is that? I know, we don't learn this. Or you might say, okay, but who even knows what chromosome someone actually has? Hormones. Hormones tell us a lot. Estrogen in women and testosterone in men. Except everybody has estrogen and testosterone and progesterone and all kinds of levels. And also, you don't know about somebody's hormones by looking at them. We think we can look at a person and tell if they're a woman or a man. Often people might ask about our bodies. A woman has a uterus and 2 ovaries, except for some who don't. Men are born with 2 testicles, except for those who aren't. Some bodies are born ambiguous with both male and female sex characteristics. And as we try to drill down, neurologists are looking at our brain because maybe our brain can tell us something definitive about what makes what. But when they look at brains, here's an interesting thing. The brains of cisgendered people and non-binary people or trans people, you might think that what the brain research tells us is that trans women have brains more like cis women, and trans men have brains more like cis men, but that's not what it tells us. What they're finding is that trans people, male or female, have brains that are behaving in an entirely different way than cis men and cis women. A third or fourth or fifth thing entirely distinct from what we would expect to find as typical. According to one of the writers writing about this brain science of gender, all the science tells us in the end is that a biological male or female is not any one thing, but a collection of possibilities. A collection of possibilities. But if we go back to where I started, this question for the Supreme Court Justice about what is a woman, we know that question is not about science or about nuance. That question was part of an increasingly politicized game being played out on our bodies, on women's bodies, or bodies that can become pregnant, and especially, particularly, bodies of people who defy a gender binary as we know it. If you follow the news, you might note how often and how many times you are hearing about legislation that is targeting trans people around the country. So far in this year, we're only in May still, more than 400 anti-trans bills have been introduced, compared to 150 for all of 2022. So far in the 5 months of this year, 400, more than the past 4 years combined. Something is happening. We can look at Florida. You know, the Florida governor who introduced the Don't Say Gay bill, which prohibits teaching lessons about sexual orientation and gender identity in public schools.
Even in penguins, I might add.
Even in penguins. Or we can even be alarmed and maybe afraid, knowing that that same governor has gone to all of the colleges in Florida demanding to know identities, information about every one of their students who has sought or received treatment for gender dysphoria. Why might they need such a list of people seeking medical treatment? But this isn't about Florida. This isn't about picking at our enemies. This isn't even really about any political party or another. All over this country, there are bills introduced to prevent trans people from using public bathrooms or using the public bathroom of their choice, to prevent trans girls from participating in school athletics, to prevent gender-affirming care for minors and adults, to curb attendance and the existence of drag shows and of dressing, not even performing, of dressing in a gender that doesn't suit what someone else thinks yours should be, laws that censor how gender is discussed in schools, persecution of librarians for making these books available. I'll tell you, if we are concerned about gender-affirming treatment, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, the Endocrine Society, and other major medical organizations all oppose, medical organizations, not politicians, oppose restrictions on gender-affirming care. The American Academy of Pediatrics released a statement in August that called gender-affirming care for youth medically necessary and appropriate, and criticized what they call rampant disinformation spread by those seeking restrictions. But who can blame people for being concerned about children? I am concerned about children. I believe that you are concerned about children, and so when people say our children are in danger, it causes a stir. But here's the thing. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans supported laws that would bar discrimination against trans people in K-12 school. So most of us are pretty sure that discrimination against trans children is wrong. I don't know who these other 3 in 10 people are who are going to say, oh, yeah, discrimination is where I'm at. Even though we say it's not okay to discriminate, most Americans also will say it's inappropriate to talk about trans identity in elementary school. Some of you, if asked, would probably say you feel it's inappropriate to talk about trans identity in public schools, in any elementary school. 77% of people say inappropriate for like K through 3. And 57% of those, more than half of those, identify as Democrats. 70% of people say it's inappropriate for ages 4 to 5. And almost half of them are Democrats. So it's not political necessarily, and it's not unreasonable to be concerned about the lives of children. But I compare it to the way that we talk about teaching children about race or about sex education. remember hearing or thinking this idea: if we teach children about sex, then it means they will go out and have sex. I think most of us would look askance at that argument. If we teach children about race, that will make them be racist. I think most of us hear that argument and know that there's something not quite right about it. It's just not true that if we don't say anything about gender or gender identity, children won't have any ideas about it, because they do. A Washington Post Kaiser Family Foundation poll conducted just last year, this was the largest non-governmental survey of US trans adults. They found that 2/3 of transgender adults were children when they began to understand that their gender was different than their sex assigned at birth. 2/3 of transgender adults were children when they began to understand themselves as different than what other people were telling them that they were. And 1 in 3 of them were younger than 10. This is a real thing. And it's different than being a tomboy. Although years ago, that may have been the language available to people who understood themselves as different. That may have been the only language available for someone who was told that they were a girl, but who understood themselves as different. We have a sense of who we are. This is not girls who like pants or blue or sports or playing with toy trucks and cars. This is not boys who like to play with the girls or who eschew the rough and tumble play of other boys. These are children who are telling us they have a sense of themselves, a sense that their gender, who they know themselves to be, is different than what their doctors or maybe their parents or their schools or the other children at school are telling them they are. Most of you, I think, I'm confident, would say you know yourself to be a man or a woman. But could you say at what age you knew yourself to be a man or a woman? Do you think you always knew? Trans children are telling us, non-binary children are telling us that they know. And they're telling us they feel unsafe in their schools and unsafe in their neighborhoods, and the isolation and discrimination we know is leading to depression and substance abuse and self-harm and suicide. The Trevor Project has found that suicide is the second largest cause of death. The second largest cause of death among people aged 10 to 24. Just gender aside, that in this country, suicide is the second largest causing death for young people between ages of 10 and 24. For lesbian and gay and bisexual, transgender and queer questioning children, it is significantly increased. LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their peers. The Trevor Project estimates that more than 1.8 million queer children or youth and young adults between 13 and 24, 1.8 million seriously consider suicide each year in this country. And at least one attempts suicide every 45 seconds, not every 45 days or every 45 minutes, every 45 seconds. They have also found that 45% of queer youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. more than half of those are transgender and non-binary. I know we are concerned for youth and children and have a legitimate concern for permanency of what gender transition could be. How do you trust a 10-year-old to make a change about the whole of their life? What if they're 24 or 34 or 44 and realize that they made a mistake that they cannot undo? I don't want to delegitimize those concerns because they are also real, but here are some facts that might reassure us. That Washington Post Kaiser Family Foundation survey found that most trans adults have not actually had medical treatments related to transition. Most transition for trans people, children into adulthood, is not medical. For 75% of them, what transitioning looks like is changing their clothing or their hairstyle or their grooming to better fit the gender that is them. Or it might mean taking a different name or using a different pronoun. Less than a third have used hormone treatments, including puberty-blocking hormones, which is not irreversible. And only 16% have undergone gender-affirming surgery. In the only longitudinal study of trans youth, they looked at youth following them from ages 3, or they looked at youth who transitioned between ages 3 and 12 and followed them for a decade. The vast majority, 94%, do not change their mind. And in a review that looked at studies of 8,000 teens between the US and Canada who've had surgery, less than 1% expressed regret. And so yes, we are concerned about permanency of transition, but one, most transition is not irreversible, and two, most people who transition do not change their mind because, like most of us, they know who they are. And what they need is not for us to challenge that, but to support that. So where does that leave us? Where it leaves me is to trust those who are most directly affected, to trust parents and doctors and even children themselves. If we were talking about race, again, it would seem clear that the voice that was most legitimate would be people of color. If we were talking about gender or misogyny, we would look to women to tell us of their experience. If we were talking about immigration or if we were talking about poverty, we would look to the people most directly affected. And so where that leaves us is to trust children when they tell us who they are, to trust their parents who love them, to trust their doctors who are trained to treat them. Where it leaves us, probably a lot of us, is to stretch out of where we are in terms of knowledge, stretch beyond where we are, to learn about gender, to learn about what it means to be transgender, to learn about the complexities of the gender binary. Where it leaves us is stretching, again, for a lot of us, outside of our comfort zone. Maybe that means learning about pronouns. Maybe it means going beyond thinking that they are confusing or tedious. Maybe it means not assuming who someone is when we look at them by how they style their hair or how they dress or the names that they have been given or the names that they have chosen. What it means is not balking when someone asks us to do something unfamiliar, to consider something unheard of, to be in a way that is nothing like our understanding of gender, to maybe live in the uncertainty of what it means to be a woman for a while. Maybe practically speaking, it means opening our space to trans people or trans children, getting involved with the LGBTQ center that meets at the Whalers Church. It's right in our neighborhood. Maybe it means thinking again about whether or not you want to march in the parade on Saturday, because it matters to people when we show up. Because it's not enough, and I think we know this, but we have busy lives, and we're not sure. But 400 bills, and I want to find the number again. 400 bills and suicide being the second leading cause of death for children between 10 and 24 suggests to me that it also is not enough to be supportive quietly in our homes and in our meeting house or where we work. It means that we have to be, if we are supportive, more than silent. It means that we have to show up for trans people and trans children the same way that we show up for any other people who we know are marginalized and oppressed. Our love and support makes a difference. Love and support is the mandate of this faith that affirms the worth and dignity of every single person, that recognizes every body as whole and holy, that understands love as wanting what is best, of wanting what is best for our beloved, even if we don't understand it. And not just wanting what is best for our beloved, but working to make it happen. I describe this service as just one sentence. How do we create gender-inclusive communities? The answer, complex and simple as can be, to answer the call of love that we claim as this faith. Our closing hymn this morning is in your teal hymnal. In your hymnal, it will read as number, somebody can yell it out because it's going to take me a minute to pull it, 1014, standing on the side of love. The author has asked us, looking at more inclusive language around both gender and especially in this case around ability, to shift our wording for standing on the side of love to answering the call of love. It means the same thing. Maybe it means even more. So let's sing together that hymn in your teal hymnal, Answering the Call of Love.
Of spirit
truth in our hearts is our guide. We are calling the song of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
In the meeting house, we invite you to stay and join us for light refreshments, to sign up for your turn as a greeter. And if you are visiting in person or online, please do sign our guest book and join us next week when we'll walk with Sean and then listen to Sean. These words are from Elena Westbrook. Go in hope, for the arc of the universe is long, and we can bend it towards justice. Go in courage, for together we have the strength to confront injustice in our daily lives and the larger world. Go in love, because holy and generous love is both the reason and the means by which we transform our lives. We extinguish our chalice with the words printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame